Welcome to the Pink Sphere podcast. This is your 30 minutes of pink, your weekly space to pause, reflect, and hear something that might just shift the way you move through the world. Each week, one of our amazing coaches join us to share something real, something women actually need. Today, we got Julia with us, diving into a topic that hits both personally and professionally. Your brand voice is your power. Hi, Julia. How are you?
Hi, nice to see you, Nadine.
I just want to ask you how you got into doing brand voice.
My professional background is actually in nursing, oddly enough. So I worked as a ER nurse and cardiac nurse for several years, and then started my business in 2020. I wanted to be moving around less. I was doing travel nursing and wanted something that was a little more kind of moved with me instead of the other way around. And so I started a copywriting business. I'd always been interested in kind of the psychology of writing and how words really have such an impact on people's decisions and how you feel, and
Yeah.
just kind of that you can really make a big difference with what you're saying and writing. And so I started copywriting for therapists. In particular, it was for private practice therapists, and it was 2020, so everything was moving online, and so there were a lot of therapists. So I was helping with kind of revamping their website and getting things
Mhm.
like blogs and emails and social media and things like that up and running. So it was really fun to kind of see that develop, and it ended up being that the first few therapists that I worked with, I kind of lucked out that they shared a very similar voice to me. We kind of had the same sense of humor and the same like tones that we liked to hit. And so it felt like I could basically write as myself and pass it off as them.
Mhm.
And as I got more into it and was writing for more people, working with other copywriters, things like that, you kind of notice that like that's not always the case, right? That you're going to wind up encountering people who are running their business and have a very different idea of what they want to say and how they want to say it, how they want it to come across. And the things that came kind of naturally to me, they were like, "Ooh, no, that's like, I would never say that. That's not right. It doesn't sound right." Like, and so it kind of got me down this rabbit hole of what makes that up, right? Like, what is happening when something sounds off or sounds on brand, and how can you adjust that? And I didn't know that there was such a thing as brand voice before kind of, uh, you know, dabbling in that myself. And it ended up being that there is obviously such a thing as brand voice, which is exactly that study of what do you want to say and how do you want to say it. And so I ended up training under Justin Blackman, who's one of the brand voice experts, and has developed a system where you can basically measure what is often kind of left up to intuition. So usually when we talk about branding and messaging and kind of strategy stuff, it's a lot around intuition and a lot
Yeah.
around like what kind of feels right or what sounds good, but there's no real metrics given to it. And
Mhm.
so what really appealed to me about Justin's approach was the the measurability of it really allows you to be consistent. It
Mhm.
allows you to hit the same voice time and time again, which is great, especially for personal brands when we've got life going on, and sometimes you're not in the mood to show up
Yeah.
in your business as you've shown up before, which obviously there's some kind of like normal variation, but it can be really
Mhm.
jarring for clients if all of a sudden you're showing up with a completely different tone in your business. So giving people a little bit more of that solid idea of like, here is the point on the map that we're aiming for with your voice, and here are the measurable ways that you can
Mhm.
consistently hit it, has been really fun.
So you say tone is different than the brand voice, right? How so?
Yeah, so tone is probably when people think of brand voice, if they've heard of brand voice, which a lot of people haven't necessarily heard of it, like I didn't several years ago. um, so when you think of a brand voice guide, a lot of people think, oh, that's the little guide that tells you like my voice is friendly and professional, or kind of a handful of tone words, right, that they'll throw out. Um, and what's interesting about that is tone is where I start with my brand voice
Mhm.
guides as well, but it's just the starting point. And it's something that's way more nuanced than a lot of tones would suggest. Like I go through over 100 tone words with people when we're trying to figure out what they want as their voice. So we're not just looking at 3 or 4 and going, oh, well, I guess those are close enough. Like we really want to get clear on the tone, but that is just the beginning of, okay, what does that look like in terms of your vocabulary choices, in terms of things like your cadence, so like your sentence length, kind of the rhythm of your writing. What things will support those tones? Because everybody's interpretation of tones is different. Like one of the words that gets a lot of conversation is critical. It's a tone word that we go through in the list, and some people automatically go, oh my gosh, no, of course not. I'm not critical. I don't criticize people. That's like the
Mm-hmm.
antithesis of what I want my brand to be. And other people go, you know what? Like I really do like, critical thinking. I like the critiques of, what is going, and people take it in completely different directions. So you can imagine that if you just had critical written on your brand voice guide, or even we're not critical on your brand, like people are going to interpret that so differently. And if you handed that to 10 different copywriters, you're going to get 10 different versions of what this means.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, tone is the starting point. Absolutely. We want to hit the
Mm-hmm.
tone that you're going for. But I want to know, like, what does that mean to you? What do these tone words mean? What's the story behind it? And how can we accurately and consistently convey those tones?
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in terms of the other kind of measurable parts, like your vocabulary, cadence, and like punctuation kind of styling choices?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think with your brand voice, you're creating that person that you want to be seen like?
Yeah, one of the words that is used the most in terms of personal branding is the word authentic.
Yeah.
And it's something that I agree with the sentiment behind it of you want it to be something that accurately represents you and that articulates what you're all about and what you do. But my problem with the word authenticity or authentic is that it it makes it seem like there's one version that you're just easily going to fall into because it's your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is that, as with any other context, your brand voice, your business persona is something that you can consciously create, right? It's something that you can be really intentional about. And
Mm-hmm.
I often, talk with people about, like, when we talk about authenticity, there's no kind of notice given to context to say,
Mm-hmm.
well, my authentic self is going to sound different when I'm on a podcast here talking about brand voice compared to when I'm talking to my partner, when I'm talking to my dog, when I'm talking to my sister. Like those are all different authentic voices,
Yeah.
but it doesn't help me determine which of those or which parts of those do I want to bring into my business. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think people often kind of accidentally fall into a brand voice in their business, but they don't necessarily know, like, was this because I was told to sound this way by a mentor? Was this because I'm just falling back into my like essay writing days from high school? Is this because there's like so many different things in the mix that getting really intentional about how do you want to show up in your business
Mm-hmm.
is not to say let's create a totally fake persona for you and your brand, but it is to say let's get intentional about what parts do you want to bring into your brand and in kind of what levels, right?
Yeah.
How do we want to kind of modulate that?
What is the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make when they are building their brand voice?
Mm, that's a great question.
For example, what do you think about AI? Because, there are lots of generic content it generates, but what do you think about the biggest mistake?
Yeah, so AI has been really interesting to see kind of come up even in, like, when I started in 2020, it wasn't
Yeah.
on our radar, right? And it's since just absolutely rocketed. And what's great about AI is that, like, its biggest feature is its speed, right? Like
Yeah.
that's its biggest pro. The biggest con is that it's not thinking of anything new under the sun. Like it is literally just taking everything else that already exists and giving you the most likely answer. So what's challenging with it is oftentimes, for me, and what the feedback I've heard from other entrepreneurs is that AI can be great for like just giving you something, right, to
Yeah,
work with. But it
giving you
often
the
ends up,
idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And it kind of solves the like blank page problem, right? Where you're
Hmm.
not just staring at nothing anymore. But often you get something and it's like, oh, it's close-ish. It's like in the ballpark, but I don't know what's off about it and I don't know how to fix it, are the two kind of
Yeah.
most common problems. And that to me is where I think AI is a great tool, but with any tool, you need somebody driving it. You need somebody making the decisions that is
Yeah.
driving the output or that is fine tuning it at the end. So like you still need somebody who's who's involved in this outside of AI. And that for most solopreneurs is you as the founder, right? I mean, for some
Yeah.
people they hire a marketing team, but often it's us. And that's where the the measurability piece of knowing, oh, if I got this social media post suggestion from AI and I go, oh, that's good, but it's not quite there.
Hmm.
If I haven't done the work to know what tones do I want to hit, what are my vocabulary choices, what cadence do I use in my writing, what are my stylistic choices, if I don't have that mapped out, I'm going to be guessing. I'm going to be guessing and taking a stab in the dark and going, I wonder if I, change this, maybe that'll make it sound right.
Yeah.
And maybe it will, but maybe it won't. And the great thing about having mapped out a brand voice is that you know what to tweak to get it there.
Hmm.
And you
Hmm.
can take really any concept and hit the mark. So
Yeah.
that I think is the one of the mistakes I think that entrepreneurs make with brand voice, especially with all of the rhetoric around like just show up as yourself, just be authentic. It's super easy. Like just is to think that it is easy and that like whatever comes out first is your brand voice. And I think the missing piece is that you can actually be really intentional about it.
Yeah.
And you don't have to follow other people's rules. You don't have to go back to the way you wrote in high school. You don't have like you're really in charge of this. And I think people just don't often know that there are that many options. Like even that there are 100 different
Yeah.
tones you can have in your brand voice. Like, um, yeah. So I think that's the biggest piece.
With the chat GPT and all the AI apps, one thing that bothers me the most is it just doesn't listen to you sometimes. I keep telling it, don't start with or don't end with one step at a time. It's it's just repeated on all of the content
Hmm.
I'm trying to create. So it just doesn't listen to you sometimes.
Yeah.
And what you think is that if my chat GPT is creating
Yeah.
this content right now, then it's creating it for somebody out there at the
Yeah.
other side of the world. And
Yeah.
what makes you different is just like you said, the way
Yeah.
you drive it, the way you take it to another direction. What is one amazing brand voice that you saw,
Yeah.
and
That's a great question.
what interested you about it?
Yeah. So it's not a big brand. I actually, this one is one that I've only found recently, and it's a potter on
I
Instagram.
remember that. Yes, you
Yeah,
shared it with me. Yes.
yeah, we were talking about. Let me see. I thought I had taken a picture of his stuff.
It doesn't have to be amazing, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be all the beautiful words, all the perfect grammar, all
yeah.
the nice emojis. It just have to be something so different at its core, something that hasn't been done before,
Well,
right?
and what I like about this one is that Matthew plays with fire. There we go. That's what it's
Mhm.
called. And he's a potter, um, who does really cool designs
Yeah.
and like tape that he pulls off. And his brand voice caught my eye. Um, so I talked about kind of cadence, like your sentence length.
Hmm.
It's one of the things that we kind of subconsciously notice the most about people's brand voices, but it's not something that is commonly talked about in terms of brand voice strategy or brand voice guides, things like that. And that's really kind of what is your rhythm of your writing. Is it long sentences? Is it short sentences? Is it punchy? Is it like, what are you doing with your sentence length? And then also your styling choices. So like, how are you punctuating? Are you doing any all caps? Do you have bolds, italics, dashes, brackets, ellipses? Like, what is your style? And especially when we're reading, um, those are the visual cues that will tell us like, oh, this is somebody's voice, right? Like you can
Yeah.
tell, I could tell a post from this guy a mile away. They are so distinctive. And obviously you don't have to go all out and break all of the grammar rules and, and I know that that gives people, some people just like instant anxiety where they're like, oh no, I like the grammar. But this guy's post is he uses a lot of ellipses, I think. Oh, he
Mhm.
does have an actual end of a sentence in this one. He says, so he starts with a dot dot dot, lowercase. Here it is, ellipses, all of it, ellipses, every last bit, ellipses mostly, ellipses, some rounding always occurs, ellipses, maybe a break to breathe. Period. There's an actual sentence. Shocking. Capital letter. Some of you will say it's too long, ellipses, other too short. Others have a dirty mind, dot, 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 while others yell, hypocrite. It isn't code, ellipses. That's for the bits you can't see, ellipses, at least what it always is, ellipses, and also the bits you can, ellipses. And this bit is getting old, ellipses. Yes, I showed the fired piece, smiley face emoji. So it looks like absolute chaos. Like it's,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's got like a really distinctive look to it. And
Yeah.
it, when I read it and you kind of hear
Yeah,
writing
you
in your
hear it.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this one, I think the last post of his that I shared with you too had it where he's got this kind of, there's like a sense of humor in there, which I
Yeah.
wouldn't have expected. There's a little like existential crisis. There's a little kind of commentary on what's going on and society's habits. There's like a dirty joke. Like there's so many different things happening that are not what I would have pegged as like a Potter's brand voice, right? Like
Yeah.
if you put into AI, make me a
Mhm.
post about this latest mug that I made, there is no way in hell that you are getting that
This.
output.
Yeah.
So it's
It is
things like
such a
that.
distinctive brand voice, really different than others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a big reason why I followed him. Yes, his pottery is gorgeous, and I think his videos are really fun. You can see him making it, but his posts always just like crack me up. I think his perspective is so unique,
Yeah.
and
It
yeah,
makes you stop scrolling and just
yeah,
look at it instead of those long sentences that
yeah.
you start to get bored with the first sentence.
Interestingly, the one of the biggest pieces I think of developing your own brand voice is separating what what is being kind of touted as like best practice and is that true for you? Of
Mhm.
best practices are often talked about like right at a below grade 6 level. Use like short sentences, use easy to understand words. Make sure that you like people know exactly what to do to buy this. Like have clear calls to action. You know, use emojis, be excited. Like there's kind of a like a peppy cheerleader voice that
Yeah.
is the like best practice for conversion copywriting.
Mhm.
And what's really interesting is that almost anything on the spectrum is a valid brand voice. The
Yeah.
piece that always gets me, especially when I see people writing in those really long sentences, those really long paragraphs, isn't that that's not a valid brand voice. But usually what's happened is that it's not intentional. And that's the
Mhm.
biggest piece is like if you're doing that on purpose, if you have gone through the work of determining what tones you want to have and you have seen that this cadence and this vocabulary level is what supports the tones that you want to have,
Mhm.
then knock yourself out. That is a completely valid brand voice. I remember a while ago, I was looking at Tiffany's website, the
Mhm.
diamond company.
Yeah.
If you measure their writing, it's like at a postgraduate level or something ridiculous. They write in dense, long sentences,
Ah,
but you better believe that that's intentional. They are selling overpriced jewelry to people who want something that's been
yeah.
around for hundreds of years. So it's that is it intentional is the biggest piece for me, because if you're just slipping into it, it's not going to have the same punch.
My next question, which is also something that I want to learn. Do you really think that brand voice needs to be consistent on all the social platforms? Or do you
Mm,
think there should be a few things that makes it different on each platform?
yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's something where a lot of times, again, kind of best practice is talked about in the sense that you have the same brand voice across all platforms.
Hmm.
And I think that that is largely true. Like if I were to just pick one or the other, do you want to be consistent or not? I'd say probably be consistent.
Hmm.
But it misses, I think, a lot of the nuance around what the purpose is of those different platforms. And it actually kind of connects back to that conversation around authenticity. What
Hmm.
is your authentic voice is going to vary depending on context, just as it does in real life. Like there's going to be a difference between how I post on social media, which is a platform built for like quick, casual connections primarily, compared to a blog where I have more room to kind of expand on this, and it's a more formal space. It's it's posted on, like, there's a difference.
Yeah.
And what I think is missed a lot of times is that nuance of how do you want to have that balance of understanding that there are different contexts to different platforms without being so jarring in your change that you lose clients. Because when, like, ideally you're kind of building an ecosystem, right, where people are
Hmm.
going to bounce between, finding you on social media, for example, to checking out your website or booking a call with you, signing up for your emails, like whatever it is, they're going to kind of get
Yeah.
a mixture of different points of contact from you. And you want all of those to work together, and not have them, go from your social media to your website and go like, did I click on the right link? Like, is this what happened? Um, because that happens a lot, surprisingly. Like, where did I end up? Oh my gosh. But you want it to be consistent enough with the understanding that if you wrote the same way, like if this Potter, for example, wrote an entire website in that brand voice, he'd lose me, right? Like I would absolutely lose my mind. When I go to his website, I want to see, like, what does he have for sale? Where is he located? What are his shipping processes? Like, I don't know, but there's different contexts that I want to have on the website versus on his social media posts.
Hmm.
And there's a way to structure it where it's all under the same umbrella of kind of that persona we were talking about, but there is nuance of how you're showing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're different when you're on TikTok. It's
Yeah.
like you're talking to a friend, and on LinkedIn, you're a little bit more serious, right?
Totally.
And you need respect and you need to show respect. What is your top tip or your advice for someone who's just starting and she doesn't feel interesting enough?
Mm, yeah. So I think actually on one of the networking calls we did, we had someone ask a similar question where she
Yeah.
said, all of these accounts that I really like following, they're really funny, and I'm just not that funny. And like,
Yeah.
what do I do? And I think, first of all, as women, we often think that we're not as interesting as we are. So I think there's some of just kind of like, give yourself the benefit of the doubt that you are probably more interesting than you think you are. But for me, it comes back to that measurability piece of when, for this woman who was saying, I see all these accounts that are funny and I'm not funny. How do I, like, what do I do? We talked about breaking some of those things down into those more measurable pieces to say, when you see someone else's post and you think it's funny, what is it? Right?
Yeah.
Did they make a joke? Did they make a commentary? Did they do like wordplay? Did they have a pun? Did they, like, what was it? Because there's such a broad understanding of what is a sense of humor, what is funny. And so noticing for her, noticing what does she find funny in other people's posts will be
Hmm.
interesting. but to then also think, like, what kind of humor does she have? You know, because I'm sure that she has some sort of humor in her
Hidden
life.
inside, yeah.
Right. And whether it's a dry sense of humor, whether it's like like there's so many options. But
Hmm.
once you kind of break it down into the measurability pieces, you can get more clear on like, oh, I don't make knock knock jokes, but I do make a mean pun. Like, I don't know, it's going to be something
Something, yeah.
unique to you. And with I'm not interesting enough is such a broad category, first of all. So I would probably, invite the question of like, what things do you think is interesting? What when you see someone else's post and you go, God, they're so interesting and I'll never be that interesting. What is it? Are they sharing life experience? Are they sharing a loud opinion? Are they, what is it about that post or about that email or whatever it was that made you think, oh, I'm never going to have that? And do you have that? Or do you have some version of that? Like, again, you might not hit the same, oh, I don't know, if they're traveling around the world and they've been to 47 countries and like, okay, I haven't been to 47 countries, but I've done lots of other cool shit. Like there's a lot of different options of what interesting is. And as soon as you're able to give some structure to what it is, I think it's a lot easier to see it within yourself.
Yeah, everything needs work. You need to
Yeah.
find something that's interesting about you and
Yes.
then turn it into your authentic voice and keep building on it and
Yes.
create a presence on social media, on any other platforms you're using. So,
About the being interesting piece,
yeah,
because this is going to sound really weird, but I don't think you actually have to be that interesting. The it's about being intentional. There's a poet, Brian Bilston, who I
hmm,
also follow on Instagram, and he has one of the I think it's hilarious. I get a lot of joy from his posts, but arguably they are very dry, very
hmm,
like I would say uninteresting if you're going on the scale of like, you know, sharing wild adventures and being super something. Like I was trying to find a good one to screenshot and was going through a bunch of his posts, and
yeah.
literally like 90% of them, the post is like the title of the poem. And that's it. Like he's just literally written the title of the poem that you can see in the screenshot of the poem, and
Wow.
that's his post. So like you don't have to be interesting. His post that I did end up screenshotting was, a few people have messaged me over the last week to ask whether I've had any of my poetry published. So I thought I'd better mention that I have, and that my book should hopefully be available via your local bookstore or online. Also, I'll try to remember to mention each day which collection the daily poem may have come from. Anyhow, here's a picture of what they all look like. Let me know if you have any polite questions about any of them. Like,
Wow.
this is It is not what I would qualify as like an interesting brand voice, but I
It
love it.
is. It
It's
is,
great.
yeah.
So
You
it's
you kind of
again like,
feel like, sorry, you kind of feel like he's bored, you know?
yes,
He's tired of living, you know?
this is a voice that you don't see very often. It's some of his other posts are more obvious, but it kind of falls into a category that we call like the underdog, and it's really kind of this like, take it or leave it. Like I did a thing. I don't know if it's good or not. Like I don't know why anyone would ever bother buying this, but like if you wanted to for some stupid reason, here's the like it's that which it goes against all of the rules of copywriting, right? Like
Yeah,
this is the opposite of what ChatGPT would come up of you're like promote my poet
exactly. Yeah.
collection. It'd be like, oh my gosh, I wrote the best poems, and he's just like, I don't know, somebody who asked, like here it is, I guess. I don't know why you'd want it, but like knock yourself out. Yeah. So, um,
But be polite,
polite,
right?
polite questions, exactly. So that's what I think is so interesting is that even if you're looking at other people's posts and going, oh, they have this life and this perspective that I'm never going to have, that's fine. That's actually for the best because honestly, you don't want the same perspective and life experience
Hmm.
as them. You have your own and like run with it, whatever it is. You don't have to force yourself to like make snazzy posts, or it's like, that's fine. You can just say, ask me polite questions.
Do you think brand voice can be changed in time? For example, I
Mm,
start with something and then I feel like this is not me and I want to
yes.
change it. Do you think it's possible? Or you should stick to what you started with and go on just like that?
I think it's definitely possible, and often for the best. I think a lot of people, especially with kind of single founder, small businesses where your personal brand is what you're running with,
Hmm.
I'd be kind of disappointed, honestly, if there's no like evolution in that over the time that you're in your business, right? It's something where, yeah, as we talked about, I think a lot of people start out kind of just falling into a brand voice by
Hmm.
accident, um, or they never really get clear on one. And a lot of people run successful businesses without ever, really kind of nailing this down. So I hesitate to say it's like, a requirement for success. I don't think it is, but it is something that's going to make it easier and more fun to do for longer.
Hmm.
And those are big pluses in my books of, a lot of the people that I work with are at kind of a pivot point in their business.
Hmm.
They're not necessarily just starting out. I often think starting out, you don't need like this much detail into your brand voice. You
Yeah.
just kind of need a couple insights, and you're off. But for people who have been doing it for a few years, several years, and are now at that point of kind of reevaluating and going, like you said, does this still suit me? Is this still aligned with what I'm doing? How have I changed? How has my business changed? There's a lot to be said for knowing how to pivot, and that again is where kind of the confidence of being able to measure some of your elements of your voice, you can really be intentional about what you're tweaking. So it might be that we look at, what you're saying hasn't necessarily changed. Maybe you are saying the same thing you were 5 years
Yeah.
ago, although I bet good money that there's at least something that's changed in there. But maybe it's that you've become more confident or more like intolerant of bullshit or whatever it is, but like there's going to be a shift in your tone. There's going to be a shift in your cadence. You're probably going to style your writing a little bit
Hmm.
differently, but those are all things where instead of just going, this doesn't suit me anymore and I don't know what to change, it gives you that really clear direction of, oh, that's so interesting, like this used to suit me because this is what I was operating from. And now that I know these things, have these experiences, have grown as a person, like obviously my perspective has shifted, my voice has shifted. And if I just shorten my sentences, I'll actually sound much more like my new self. And so
Yeah.
there's often kind of a panic that sets in with this idea of pivoting and pivoting to what and how and why, and putting some kind of structure around that really helps.
Yeah. Yeah. So you change in time, and so does your brand, and so does your brand voice.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to listen up. And that's a wrap on this week's 30 Minutes of Pink. If Julia's message made you think or made you feel seen, go find her on the Pink Sphere platform. Her coaching, her session, her voice, it's all there waiting for you. And make sure you follow the podcast, share it with someone who needs this, and stay tuned. Next week brings another coach, another topic, and another 30 Minutes of Pink. Thank you for being here, and you're doing better than you think.